Can we call the meeting to order? Do we have minutes to approve?
No.
No minutes? Then we'll go right into the staff report. Clyde Doolin.
Good evening, members of the local planning agency. My name is Clyde Doolin, for the record. I'm the comprehensive planning administrator. With me is a new planner in our department, Jenna Nobby. I'd like to introduce her to you all. She's done a lot of the work on Chapter 1, even though my name's on it. So I'm going to turn it over to her in just a second. This is a perfect example of housekeeping. This chapter has very few changes. The one major change we had to do was to recognize a new date in statute, and the rest of it is really just minor housekeeping changes. So our ear-based amendments are typically housekeeping and Florida statute driven, and so this is the first of 3 public hearings. The last one won't occur until first quarter of next year.
Mr. Doolin, can you just announce the title of this public hearing and what we are hearing today, please?
Sure. This is NPH number 1. It is Comprehensive Plan Amendment 2401 Preamble. This is Chapter 1 of the Comprehensive Growth Management Plan.
Thank you.
And with that, I'll let Jenna go ahead and do a rundown on the changes.
Good evening, members of the local planning agency. My name is Jenna Nobby, planner with the Comprehensive Planning Division of the Growth Management Department. As Clyde mentioned, this is a proposed text amendment to Chapter 1 of the Comprehensive Plan as part of the EAR process, which is Evaluation and Appraisal Report. So with the staff report that was made part of this agenda packet, page 3 outlines the proposed changes to Chapter 1. Section 1.7b, Housing Unit Demand Projection, is proposed for revision to remove the reference to the Indiantown Urban Service District and to clarify that parcels within incorporated municipalities are not included in the housing unit demand projection for unincorporated Martin County. A similar revision is proposed for Section 1.7c, residential capacity calculations, to also remove reference to the Indiantown Urban Service District and to clarify that parcels within incorporated municipalities are not included in residential capacity calculations for unincorporated Martin County. Also in Section 1.7c, residential capacity calculations, we are revising the existing 15-year planning period language to now specify a 20-year planning period, and this change is consistent with Section 163.3177 of Florida statute. The remainder of the changes in Chapter 1 are, as Clyde mentioned, housekeeping with renumbering sections for accuracy and ensuring that any references to those sections that are renumbered are updated accordingly. So that concludes staff's presentation for Chapter 1, and we are available to answer any questions.
I have a question. Can you tell me why bringing up the language of the secondary urban service boundary within Indiantown is germane? Because it's my understanding that we took Indiantown off of our criteria many years ago, certainly right around the time that Newfields was being approved.
That's absolutely true. And I'm going to go to the map here briefly and show you. The village of Indiantown did consume the entire primary and secondary urban service district when they incorporated in 2017. What am I looking for here? There we are. But then they de-annexed a portion of the secondary urban service district. The residents in this subdivision called Little Ranch Estates wanted out. So this area right here, where you see the secondary urban service district hatching, it's not in the village anymore. It's in unincorporated Martin County. And our plan policy calls for identifying everything in unincorporated primary and secondary urban service district. What I'll do is I'll turn on the municipal boundaries. And so you can see how the municipal boundary hatching, the blue and white going this way, covers everything else except this little sliver right here and Little Ranch Estates. So it's appropriate to recognize that this needs to be picked up as part of our residential capacity analysis calculations, and and to reaffirm that the rest of it will not be included in our residential capacity analysis calculations.
The other question I have is about changing from 15 to 20-year.
Before you go there, while we're on Indiantown, so to the right, what is that?
You mean this?
Yeah,
That long strip?
That is a strip of land that has an agricultural future land use designation that is not in the village. And I can't tell you how that got secondary urban service district on it.
okay. Go ahead, Jim, I'm sorry.
No, I'm concerned and curious, why go from 15 to 20-year horizon for capacity? It seems as though it's harder to predict further out, and it also makes controlling growth considerably more difficult.
I believe that the intent with that statute was to change the existing horizons from 5 to 10 years to 10 to 20 years, if that's correct, or?
I believe Florida statute is the driving force for this, and it says 10 and 20. It says that we will use planning periods of 10 and 20 years. And so that's where we're required to go.
That bothers me. It concerns me a lot.
It's a change that we're going to have to make in most of the chapters of the plan that we're bringing to you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we also can use a 10-year planning horizon as well, or
Well-
instead of,
It does require a 10-year.
okay, but we're projecting out 20 years for our capacity, which I think is, a very long time out into the future, and also provides a certain amount of residential capacity in the near term that may not actually be real.
That may be the case.
That's my opinion. I think that it's going to be utilized to expand our urban service boundary prematurely.
Any other comments?
So then, taking Jim's concerns, what do we do with your concern?
Go to 10-year.
Oh, no, I'm just saying, so what do we do with his concern? And how do we address it? We're here for a reason, I hope, besides just making a concern known once in a while.
Well, the 10-year planning period will still be a requirement, and we'll be able to do that. We'll be continuing to do that. If you wish, when we get to, if you're making a recommendation to change the residential capacity analysis to in some way in the future,
No, I think that we have certain standards that the county has adopted for decades, and we have, in the last recent history, done a pretty good job of changing some of that planning capacity, and the urban service capacity, residential capacity, has been, one of the strong legs that Martin County's growth management department has stood on, and I think that it's being diminished. It concerns me a lot.
Mr. Moore, go ahead, Luis.
I was just going to say we're required by statute to include that 20-year plan. We have to at least do the first 10-year and a 20-year plan. We can do a 5-year plan and a 15-year plan and add on to it, but we have to do the 20-year plan per statute.
So, Elise, we will be doing a 10-year plan,
Correct, we're required to.
and we will be doing then a 20-year plan, because that's also part of that same statute.
It's a 20-year period, planning period, yes.
And the other alternative would be a 5-year plan and a 15-year plan.
No, it would be 5, 10, 15, 20.
Ah,
Like, we have to do the 10 and 20. at least the 10 and 20. You can do more, but we're required to do the 10 and 20.
But if the language that says that we will have a 15-year horizon for our residential capacity doesn't change to conform with that, and I have no evidence that it will, then we're changing the numbers midstream, and it concerns me that this will be used as another way to move the urban service boundary further out to agricultural lands.
So what do you, what kind of language would suit you? If we got to
I mean,
do 10 and we got to do a 20,
I think a 5, 10, and 15 and 20-year plan is the best we can do, but I think we need to change the language in there that says that our residential capacity is being reassessed every 5 years. Not at a 20-year,
we have to do 20.
capacity. Well, 20-year, but we have to do 5, 10, 15, 20.
We don't have to do 5 and 15.
No, we don't, but we can, and we should.
Well, it gets to be kind of, I mean, I don't care if it's 5 or 15, but it does get to be kind of expensive. This plan is due when? This year will be due when? By
All the items must be, Paul Schilling for the record, Growth Management Director. So the transmittals of these, all chapters are due by November 27th, I believe.
But Clyde told us it wasn't going to be finished until January.
That's correct. The transmittal hearing, we have to transmit it to the state land planning agency before November 27. They will then have 60 days to review and provide comments
Then you
or
have-
objections, and then we will bring it back to the Board of County Commissioners for adoption.
But my point is, it takes how many years to put a residential capacity analysis together? And what's the expense?
It's certainly a complicated endeavor. It varies on the scale of,
We put one together in December of 2023 and produced it.
How long did it take you to do that?
It took us the better part of 2023.
So I think my point is it would be nice if we had them more frequently, but because of what it takes to do them, I also understand what you're trying to accomplish by not doing so many of them. And I don't know how much information we get with on a 5-year window, because it's actually a 3-year window when you take a look at everything.
and just for some context, I don't want to confuse matters, but the transportation, we're looking at 25-year plans.
Well,
So,
that's that's FDOT, isn't it?
yes.
So, yeah. Anyways, I was not as concerned as Jim. No one could be ever that concerned. But I picked up the same thing. And now, from Elisa's explanation and from what I see it takes to do these things, it's just would be one more report that nobody would read in my and it wouldn't be an accurate analysis.
Well, I respectfully disagree. I think that it's been, it was probably the reason Newfields passed. It's certainly going to be utilized by a lot of development interests to move our urban service boundary in the very near term.
Well, Newfield was passed because it was time and it was a good location and it was a good project and it's something the county needed. I
Well-
mean, that's why Newfield passed.
That's part of the reason Newfield passed.
Well, it's a big reason. But if you want to propose a motion to say, I want this in there, we'll be glad to entertain it and direct Clyde to
I
put
think
it in.
we should know what our residential capacity is on a regular basis. We should know what's been sold and what's available.
And that's what I'm saying. If you want to propose a motion to tell Clyde to put 5 years in there, we'll entertain it.
Okay, I will make a motion to put a 5-year window for our residential capacity.
Any seconds?
We need to ask for public comment before you vote.
Okay.
Well, before we have a second on the motion?
You can second and then do public comment. I just didn't want you to
seconds?
vote.
There's no second, the motion failed.
Yeah, I was just wanting for the motion.
No, I agree, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure you didn't vote like real quick after.
So we done with comments?
Yeah, motion and it failed, so to get a second. So public comment? Anybody in the public?
Any public comment?
I'll move that we recommend approval of this to the commission.
I'll second it.
All in favor? Aye.
Well, now you need public
I'm a-
comment before
yeah.
the aye.
No,
No.
it's okay. Now you
Okay.
already
Now we're
asked for
good.
public comment.
Okay.
We're good.
I already asked for public comment.
I'm opposed.
Okay. Motion is approved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. It is, and it is on, slide deck's on page 69. Members of the local planning agency, my name is Clyde Doolin, again for the record. This is NPH number 2. This is Comprehensive Plan Amendment 24-05. This is the transportation element, Chapter 5 of the Comprehensive Growth Management Plan. And with me is Luke Lambert. Also is available is Lisa Wixer for questions. And I'm going to go to the slide deck and turn it over to Luke to go through the details. But I will say that like the last one, this is largely housekeeping. This is rearranging text for organization purposes, and this is compliance with state statute. You see a lot of things happening in this chapter, but not a lot of change in policy. So I'll let Luke give you the details and the specifics.
Good evening. I am definitely not Samantha Lovelady.
I don't know, your voice isn't as deep.
That's weird.
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys have a very thorough staff summary in front of you all, and I'm going to run through a couple of slides, and we could go back and forth to try and help everybody. As Clyde pointed out, this was like largely a reorganization, a passion project of Public Works staff on making this as easily digestible as possible. And so the features were reordered consistently across it. So if you looked, basically, the existing conditions and future needs were updated for consistency with statutes and studies and guidance. And the big thing is, I'm going to go back to this matrix. So Clyde, can we go to
You're looking at
the issues? And it's page 3.
page 3.
Perfect. So 79 is our slideshow. Okay. And go down one more. So this is a matrix showing the existing structure of Chapter 5 on the left and the proposed on the right. And some of the titles might have slightly changed to be more consistent with what's going on. So for instance, 5.3B used to be called public transportation. We've nailed that down to now being a like existing transit. We reorged airports so that would fit through. But the matrix that you see here was drafted to try and be the easiest method of digesting this document. So railroad and seaports, those are still there. And then when you get into section 5.4 on the existing, we've now moved that to, it's still future transportation needs, so slight rename, and then, we have them following. So I'm gonna go back to 79, or is it 80? Not 80. Okay. So as I just mentioned, the background, we moved the purpose and intent to the beginning, and we added an emphasis on our multimodal system. So I'm not sure if you are all aware, but the Board of County Commissioners adopted, Safe Streets for All action plan. So they're moving towards that multimodal network, that multimodal system. And another big thing that's a new goal here is they added a resiliency objective. And so our Environmental Resource Management Division has kind of been heading that resiliency charge for us. And so these are just kind of new things that have been added into Chapter 5 explicitly. So there we go. We can do this. There we go. Okay, so in roadways, one of the new things for this chapter is, and really an annual basis, we produce the roadway needs assessment. And that's when we look at our transportation network. I believe we talked about that last time we were discussing a project in the roadways. And the quality level of service concept has been updated. We could go deeper into that, but essentially the big picture is we moved to what's called context classifications. and the vulnerability assessment that I mentioned earlier. This is a graphic of what context classification means. This is done largely by the Florida Department of Transportation, and their goal was to kind of be more, have like a statewide look at this, and really it's kind of like, what do motorists expect on the roadways? And so the sentence is really the key thing. When you're in a rural environment, you expect less congestion, and when you're in an urban environment, you kind of expect that type of situation. And so if you look through, there's C1, which is our natural areas, that's like completely untouched. Think of like the Everglades when you're out there. And then moving down to C6 would be like a downtown Miami. Martin County does not have any C6s. We don't have any C5s. I believe C4 is the most urban context that we have. And we assigned that during our 2023 roadway level of service inventory report. So 5.1 is the existing roadway needs. 5.5 is the roadway needs, where we clarify our short and long-term forecasting methods. So when I mentioned that roadway needs assessment we do, that's where we actually do in transportation. We do our 5-year outlook. So we're capturing counts in 2023, and then we're projecting those out 5 years, and then 10 years for that. And that's really our short-range analysis that Public Works does. And then I whispered in Paul's ear earlier, the long-range transportation plan is a 25-year horizon document. That's really our long-range forecasting for traffic. Goal 3 was updated. One of the big things is there used to be called level of service, standards. They were level of service standards, excuse me, and the states moved to targets, as they call them. So each year, the Florida Department of Transportation, they issue this memo, and they update their level of service target, and generally, in an urban area, it's level of service D, and certain SIS facilities, certain state highway facilities could be a C. So, for instance, Warfield Boulevard out in Indiantown is a level of service C. It's a little slightly different. So, whereas when you're in downtown, the city of Stewart sets their own level of service on their roadways. So I believe they're level of service F. So pathways, we wanted to reorg. We have a very good transportation network asset inventory, and so our sidewalks are really what create our existing pathways. And when we get to the figures, I don't know if you've all looked at those, but we've taken a look at those and we've scaled back. If the previous figures had in 10-foot wide multimodal paths, we changed the graphic to show our 8-footers. We kind of had more of those. We got some of those constructed with various development projects, but that shows you also our bike lanes and our paved shoulder facilities. So the pathways, they reflect the current facilities and our crash mitigation strategies. Chapter 5 is really that document that is what instructs Public Works to do on those annual basis. So it instructs us to do the roadway needs assessment. It instructs us biannually to do the crash surveillance report. So this is just kind of mentioning those things that we do. And then for pathway needs, it describes the efforts of how we prioritize our future projects, be it through our county CIP, through the Transportation Improvement Program, through the MPO, and all that gets into the FDOT work program. Our CIP doesn't exactly, but. And the newest thing here for pathways, which is something new that we haven't done yet, is with pathways, there's what's called traffic level stress conflicts, and that's basically this graphic here, when you have people of all ages feeling comfortable using a facility. So usually when you think about the separated pathways, like the one we got built on Willoughby Boulevard recently, that's offset from the roadway, generous 15 plus 20 feet, and the facility itself is 10 foot wide. So that would be furthest to the left on the graphic here, like a level of service 1. And level of service 4 is more of your on-road bike facilities with no buffer, where you have the most level of stress, if you will. So. Not everyone uses those facilities.
So what's the acronym for level of stress?
It's a new one. It says LTS on the graphic, but
Pothole count.
LTS. It's a LTS LOS, essentially, yeah.
Now they're LOTs, though. They're targets, not services.
Yeah, and this one is, it's traffic, so traffic stress. Goal 4.5 clarifies jurisdiction of state highway system. We transfer roadways back and forth sometimes, and so that's the major thing there. Moving into transit, so Ash Beecher is our transit administrator up in Public Works. They just completed their transit development plan. And the board has weighed in on that, and so we're moving forward with some different directions from the board. But this really just is house cleaning that kind of updates that. The big thing that's new with that is the transit capacity, quality of service, and the M escapes me. I wrote it down here. Manual, sorry. And what that goes over is essentially when you're a transit user, you're looking for frequency of service, your coverage of network, the hours of operation, your perceived travel time, access, and reliability. So those are the big targets there in TCQSM. New acronym for me. So those targets haven't been established yet by like Martin County. So moving into airports, really just a reorg. The Andrew McBean, the airport administrator, he just updated their 2023 master plan, and that talks about their operational forecast data and stuff like that. And the goals were just updated to reflect current facilities. So railroads, as you know, the FEC tracks were double tracked throughout the large majority of the area here. The St. Lucie River is still the single track. State legislatures, I think, done some appropriations to work on that facility. And really, we're just describing some of our future needs and, provide for a transportation network that's effectively coordinated with railroad operations. So today, there was definitely some uncoordination. We had some gate issues at Florida and MLK, and that was strictly a rail issue, although the signals are obviously impacted because of the rail preemption. But we're working with Brightline and FEC on all those facilities all the time. Moving in the waterways, this is largely like an MPO effort, the Metropolitan Planning Organization. The facilities here, obviously, the St. Lucie Inlet, the Intercoastal Waterway, and the St. Lucie River. The MPO has done their own waterways plan and identified some of these. And, seaports is a big component with FDOT. It recognizes, supports, and maintains marine transportation as a driver of local economics, recreation, and enjoyment, really. Enjoyment's what I think of in this region. We don't quite have that deep seaport that the Port of Palm Beach has and the Port of Fort Pierce has. And then, if interested, I could go over the figures, but if I have no further presentation, open for questions.
A couple questions. One of the points made was that you were looking for proportional contributions for, I'm forgetting the phrase. Basically paying for a roadway construction in a proportional, I've forgotten the language that was used.
Proportional share.
Share,
in
thank you.
Developments.
The only experience that I can recall that we have with that was not terribly successful on Cove Road and Canner Highway. And I just think that this sets us up for development not paying for the roadway that actually deserves and needs to be upgraded. When we talk about level of service being qualitative now, it concerns me that without having sort of a matrix for when a roadway starts to fail, we do something about it, because I think we need to have a trigger that is clearly defined as a level of service that is unacceptable. Do we have any definition of what constitutes a motorized vehicle? It concerns me because it seems to be changing a lot. I mean, we have a lot more electrified vehicles now on both multimodal and sidewalks.
Okay.
We'll start with those.
Well, I'm not sure if there's an explicit definition in the comp plan on that, but what transportation folks generally call like a single occupancy vehicle is anything kind of with four wheels that's able to drive on the roadways. And so, like, this is a for instance, just off the top of my head, normally when you access the interstate highway like I-95, you'll see that sign on the side of the road that says no motor vehicles with less than like 35 horsepower. So that might be defined in state statute for enabled to post that. But with regards to like electric bicycles, those are bicycles. Those are two-wheeled bicycles in the mind of, I believe, the state.
What about scooters and other two-wheeled vehicles that are not vehicles.
So it might need to equal up to that 35 horsepower equivalent, right? Like, so electric vehicles have large masses of torque, they have large.
Yeah.
The sheriff's department has a definition of what a vehicle is and what can come on the highway and what can come on the road.
So we worked
So
with
the
the sheriff's department
would-
on that definition, so that's golf carts, low-speed vehicles. So low-speed vehicles that are allowed on Martin County streets have to become registered vehicles with the DMV. You have to have,
What is it,
mirrors,
28
turn
miles per
lights.
hour?
Any vehicle on the county, any road, I'm sorry. This is Lisa Wixer, I'm the Chief Project Manager, or, the Chief Project Engineer for Public Works. Any vehicle that's on a thoroughfare of, whether it be county, or state, or federal, has to be registered.
Okay.
And your point about the standard versus the target, the handbook that we're using, that I think was attached to the agenda item as well, does have tables, like that we've always just referred to the tables in here. We use those things, so there are triggers of what changes the capacity, or not the capacity of the road is set, so that if the measured traffic that's carried on the road exceeds that target, then it would go into an E. And what we put in here is that if that continues over several years, then we will call it a failing roadway.
The
then
trouble
the-
is that we have seasonal
It's
use, and
season-
without having sort of the calculation in front of us, we allow it to slide.
No, we do this every year, and we use those tables and we verify and analyze we count traffic on a lot of our roads 24/7.
And there was what's called a peak seasonal factor.
There
And
is.
so during the month of June and July, usually at our lowest counts, we apply a factor when we do studies and do projections.
But when you collect that data, we're doing it in
Yeah.
like
We-
4 times a year.
We do have constant data where we're
And then-
collecting traffic volumes 24/7, 365.
We're doing it at least 4 times a year, if not consistently.
And is that in the manual? Is that referenced in the manual that shall be done?
No.
So no. So Martin County, we collect our traffic volumes here, and the Department of Transportation, they obviously collect a lot of traffic vehicle data, and so it's not really specified. So that's why peak season factors are created. So the Florida Department of Transportation's their 24/7, 365 count station is towards the base of the Roosevelt Bridge. They have multiples, and so do we. And so that's your constant survey, correct? Like you're doing that every single day of the year. Christmas, we know that that's inflated, actually. So we apply an adjustment factor to when we do any projections. So we know when our high months are, we know when our low months are, and when we need to apply those factors. So those are commonly used for like a traffic signal warrant, right? So if we go out, say we need to go out tomorrow and collect a count, we find an appropriate close locale with 365 days of counts, and we will apply that seasonal factor to our short count, if you will.
Okay.
So,
And I guess my concern is that there's a lot of detail in the comp plan, and especially in this element. Why aren't we saying that to the public who reads the comp plan?
so
I know that was a reach.
the comp plan is this big overarching guide that tells us to do things, and the Public Works Department produces reports that dive deeper into those issues. And so that roadway needs assessment gives you the details on that thing. It doesn't tell you that we count 4 times a year basically on most of our roadways, but we can, like staff can, and that's how we truth these things. And when a developer submits a traffic impact analysis, we look at the time of year, and we constantly get that, right? Oh, they counted over the weekend, and we're aware of all events that happen. So roadways get skewed, right? If there's a crash on Turnpike or I-95 near High Meadow, traffic diverts, we're aware of those, and we throw out those anomalies if we need to. So we're pretty much aware of most of that stuff.
So along the same lines, we've got now levels of stress. we've got
We're going to.
we've got levels of service and targets, and it seems as though we're really just changing language to mean the same thing. I mean, there are levels of service. There are roadways that are not that are at capacity and number, but obviously condition and/or circumstances make them much more stressful and much less useful. from a pathway perspective, I'll tell you that the roadway condition is a major issue. And if there's not a bike path, if there's not a large shoulder, and the road is in terrible shape, as a bicyclist, it's a pain,
Correct.
literally.
That would be four.
Well,
The
it'd be,
level of traffic stress is actually
Yeah.
like, it's a fairly new concept. It was really just published in the 2023 FDOT QLOS
Right.
manual. And so it's not new, but it's kind of new in this context. So that's an exercise that I happen to do down in Palm Beach County. If you could imagine, so if you're riding a bicycle along Okeechobee Boulevard, that's a much different experience than riding along like Central Parkway in Jupiter, right? Like, so that's what this kind of gets to. And the DOT, I've heard, key figures there often say, would I let my grandma or my 6-year-old ride a bike there? Like, that's where this is kind of trying to get to, right? So we want to strive to have a majority of LTS1 facilities so that they're just available, they're alternative mode of transportation where everyone feels comfortable. And knowing that sometimes you do need to provide an LTS4 for some of those commuters who have to get to work, who are doing that. I mean, certain times rights of way are constrained. The building envelope kind of constrains our rights of way. So we're going to, set a target of what we try to strive for. And I don't know if we're going to measure it linearly, but
Well, I was just going to say, I think the revision to this chapter sets it up so that it's in there. Before, it just said we rely on the long-range plan. So this kind of says, here's what we do, here's what's here today, and here's what we'll be doing in the future in order to get us there. So this is the first time it's been in there to set it up for the future as a plan. And then there's a goal for it as well, which wasn't there before.
right.
and then the board will adopt that, and then Public Works will, and, we'll all strive to reach that for Martin County.
Okay. And I guess, this is a comment from a water quality perspective. The MPO's recommendations for dredging everywhere are not going to be good for water quality. And they are not going to be good for habitat health. And I have a really hard time supporting dredging everywhere in the St. Lucie estuary to make recreation more easy. It does not make it a healthier estuary to keep dredging operations going. It does not make it a healthier estuary to pretend that Salerno is a seaport again. I'm very concerned that is included sort of as our wishful thinking for this estuary. The idea of passenger ferries from Fort Pierce to Stewart is pretty pie in the sky. It would be, directly competing with our recreational industry here if we were to have high-speed ferries, moving from Fort Pierce to Stewart.
Well, I would disagree with you on dredging everywhere. Yeah, there's places not to dredge, but the Manatee Pocket, if you dredge it and get all the silt and the mud out of it,
If it's an environmental dredging
the
project,
water quality is going to be better.
If it's
And
a-
there are plenty of places that dredging should be done to make the water quality better. So let's not put a blanket statement.
I think if you don't say things like environmental dredging, it won't get done.
What do you mean it won't get done?
It won't be environmentally dredging. It'll be just another spoil and pipe operation, and that will have negative effects on the water.
Usually, if you clean up the mud and the silt anywhere in the St. Lucie River, you're going to improve the water quality.
I think that there's an enormous amount of suspended solids in the water column as it is.
Sure there is. But if you pump off the bottom, so when it sloshes, you don't get that silt released.
No.
If you can go back to sand and get
But-
the cleaner you get that bottom, the less.
When
less,
has an
uh,
environmental dredging operation in the Martin County actually gone down to clean sand?
Well, it's a lot cleaner in the Manatee Pocket than it used to be.
Before we're way off course here, I think, do you want to say something, someone?
Mr. Lambert's going to pull up the text exactly,
I can
but
explain it.
Lisa can paraphrase.
So the reason this is in here is because it struck me that we didn't have anything in this chapter that talked about marine transportation. It talked about the fact that there was a seaport in Fort Pierce and one in West Palm. And I was like, what does that have to do with Martin County? And how much money do we spend every year dredging the inlet to keep it open? So I went back to the waterway plan, and that's where this came from. And that waterway plan was a plan that was done with Martin and St. Lucie counties. And so those things about the ferries, that came in there. That's in the text, but it's not part of the goal. The goal was to keep the inlet open and to keep the manatee pocket, and then to develop a group that would identify other areas that need to be dredged. And I think that's where that group would identify the environmental dredging for you. So just as if you want to propose different language in the future plan portion of it. So the way it was set up before, there was just a paragraph that talked about railroads and seaports. And it was,
But this is, I mean, it's
expanded it to
aspirational
say,
language.
Here's what's existing, here's what we're proposing, and here's a goal that goes with it.
And most of the comp plan is aspirational wording.
No, I don't,
And so this one right here is giving us a really roadmap, but here's what's important to the county: keeping the inlet open, making recreational boating safer, cleaning the river the best we can, and those are all good things.
then use that as the goal. I mean, I think the deepened channel in Manatee Pocket, the county considered deepening the channel to enable deeper draft vessels. It has said nothing about environmental impact.
If you do one, you're gonna get the other.
No,
Not necessarily.
more often
I
not.
would disagree.
This came from the MPO?
Yes.
So what's the experts say?
So this language came from an adopted plan from the Metropolitan Planning Organization that Lisa mentioned that was done in conjunction with St. Lucie County. So that plan itself would have gone through the whole MPO public process. There would have been advisory committees. And so it's just definitely a document that if you're interested, please review it. And if there are certain things that we could address with the text, this is the time. But we need to look at that explicit plan itself, so.
Well, I mean, if you wanted to add language or tweak the language,
Yes.
certainly you could propose something.
You know, I think that environmental dredging, and I'll use Brevard County's Sorrel program as an example of environmental dredging for the health of the estuary as its primary purpose, is an important difference between what we're talking about here, which is maintenance dredging and/or deepening channels for vessel traffic.
So Jim,
Because
propose,
we're in-
If
because,
you
well,
try
I-
to take a boat out right now and you go to coming out of the Manatee Pocket.
We're in a-
And if you look at where the Hell's Gate is, if you see what's happening with the shoaling there, it's really bad.
Well, that's because the channel's in the wrong place.
but guys, let's get back to what we're here for, not anything else.
I think that discussion is in a different element. That's in the coastal element, not in the transportation element.
So this
And-
is
but-
just talking about transportation, boating.
Correct.
And if they want to have a high-speed ferry from Fort Pierce down to here, to keep the channel open where they can do that. And it's pie in the sky, I agree with Jim on that. One of the
I
few
didn't put
things I'll
that in.
agree.
I've not-
That's pie in the sky, that ain't happening. But that's okay if somebody wants to try it.
And that's what, the transportation element really supports the county's goals. It's important to maybe know, like, what the purpose of the MPO is, the Metropolitan Planning Organization. Like, therefore, they allow us to receive federal funding and state funding, and so their portion of that plan was to do that. And so in large urban areas, they really prioritize their seaports because that's how they receive federal funding. And so we didn't say that we want that. That's why that wasn't put in there. Fort Pierce and Palm Beach are the deep water ports. Martin County is more
And we're actually
tourism-based.
part of St. Lucie County's plan.
Exactly.
And all, so anyways,
Any more comments?
yeah, I mean, I have two. And I'm not going to say I'm not going to move forward with it. But I think our public transportation is completely ridiculous. Even to put it in here is crazy because we don't have public transportation. And I know one commissioner listens to these meetings. I know no one else does. None of the others really do. But I will tell you that it's a shame to spend millions of dollars on the Marty system and spend $36 a ride to have nobody ride it. So if we're going to continue that way, gee, that's really a problem for me as a taxpayer. And if I would never be able to use the Marty system because it doesn't work. And this is just another example of why this comprehensive plan, or any comprehensive plan, is really sort of a useless thing as far as I'm concerned. Second thing, we had a letter from Morris Crady. What is all that about, a email?
Mr. Crady is suggesting, and this is really, I think, geared as much for Chapter 4 as for Chapter 5. He's suggesting that the comprehensive plan recognizes the fact that there are sometimes two future land use designations on a piece of property, residential and non-residential, and that the infrastructure, such as the roads, the water, the sewer, the stormwater, et cetera, be allowed to occur on both land use designations and not have to be segregated, so that only the roads go to the residential for residential and only the roads go to the commercial for the commercial, that you can mix it. Because we do have much more mixed use happening, and we can anticipate that there may be some live local that occurs on a commercial future land use designation.
Doesn't it have to go to the higher intensity use regardless?
The plan has been implemented in the past to put an emphasis on saying that these support facilities, these infrastructure features have to support this land use, and you can't use the support features on one land use to support the land use, to support another land use. And it's been a bit of a difficulty at times with site planning and so on like that. So I think that's what Morris is getting at in his public comment.
Is this something we should take up at a later date?
We'll definitely,
important?
we anticipate that we probably will bring forward some language and for some discussion on Chapter 4 later this year.
Because wouldn't it be smart to be able to, if you're going to run water and sewer in there, to have a loop rather than going into a residential facility and that's only what it serves, and then a commercial facility and that's only what it serves, tie them together and tie the road system together and keep people off the main highway? I mean,
That's-
that makes sense.
That's part of the discussion, yes.
Okay.
I just wanted to sort of add on to what Tom was speaking about. It didn't seem to me as though there was much reference to a future train station in Stewart. And that's going to become a major issue with public transportation in Martin County. And I think that it may even deserve a subchapter.
Well, if I don't want to get in front of Lisa and Luke on this, but there's a fine line we walk with all of these plan amendments. We know certain things are going to happen, but we don't know all the particulars. And so we try not to get too far ahead of ourselves with plan amendments. We try to identify and document things that are actually, where we have a lot of detail and specificity and we know a lot about it. If it's not fully baked, we may not want to even put something in.
And wouldn't that be part of City of Stewart's plan, not Martin, since it's.
But we have to,
did-
we have to
there-
plan for infrastructure to help.
For the goal, there's a goal for supporting the replacement and
For the
doing the
bridge.
second track of the bridge.
Right, but that's as far as we get.
You could put a goal in there.
I mean, I think that upgrading public transportation in and out of a future train station is what we really should be planning for, and it's not even in there. I mean, if we're going to be aspirational.
I don't have a problem adding that.
Is there a problem with adding that?
There's no problem. I mean, we don't have a contract or everything's not signed, sealed, and delivered. We can add it in there or suggest to the board to add it in there, but it looks like, they accepted our
Make a
proposal.
motion to approve this, let's.
I'm having some real hard time
I'll
with it.
second that motion. Go ahead, it's like a little carrot.
I know it's a carrot. I think that as it's written, it's hard to support. And I certainly don't think the proportional contributions is a good idea.
The proportional contribution, I just wanted to clarify, I put that in there because it's in the state statute that if you have, so the statute's written that you don't have to have transportation concurrency,
Which is,
but we do.
Yeah.
And we've chosen not to repeal it. And so because we do, we have to have that in there. And we have a whole chapter in the land development regulations, or a division in the land development regulations that talks about proportionate fair share. And we did accomplish a very successful interchange modification with proportional fair share prior to the 2011 growth management rule change. So the statute requires that you put it in there, but only if you're in a project, I'll now use Newfield as an example. So if your project generates enough trips to cause the need to widen a road, then you have to pay the proportionate fair share if it exceeds the amount of your impact fees. So
As long as it exceeds the impact fee.
yes, if your
Why isn't
impact
that
fees that
language
you've
in there?
collected will support the widening of that road, then you can't charge prop share. So the statutes are guiding it, but the statute was clear that if you do have transportation concurrency, that language needs to be in there, so that's why it's being proposed.
Because it concerns me that it may not be very clear and it may not be utilized in the future, that this has to be above and beyond impact fees, which are woefully low anyway.
But the statute is, our hands are tied because of the statute.
Okay.
I can use, yeah.
They gonna make the motion, Jim?
I'll make the motion that we move this forward for serious consideration of some of the marine elements as well as some of the other elements that have been sticky.
Let me try.
Okay. I might even second it. Go for it,
Let me
Tom.
try. Being sticky, I don't think is,
I didn't understand
hard
what sticky
thing to-
meant.
ask staff to take care of. All right. I'll move the approval with the mention of the trains, of how the train station is tied into the plan, and also, when it comes to dredging, that if possible, it be done in an environmentally friendly manner.
Yeah, most environmentally sensitive way possible.
Okay.
With that, I would second your motion.
So we can comment now?
Yes?
But do we supposed to get public? I'm sorry.
Well, we need public comment, but you can comment if you,
First. And we're not voting on this yet, we're just voting on the motion, I mean, this.
no, well, you're,
This amendment.
No, my motion.
it's his motion, so we're going to have public comment. You can comment, and then you'll vote on that motion, which is voting on this plan amendment to recommend or not recommend approval.
It gets kind of redundant because to get a dredging permit, you've got to go to EPA, DEP, Fish and Wildlife. You go through a whole list of stuff with all the environmental regulations. And so I don't think anybody can find somebody. We've had a dredging project that was not vetted by at least five different environmental groups. So it gets kind of silly to put something in there that is already there.
Well, I mean, there's a general public perception that dredging's fine.
Well,
And sometimes it's not.
But it's fine because it's looked at by DEP, EPA, Fish and Wildlife.
I'm not sure the EPA has anything to do with it, but
EPA probably, but DEP does. The Corps of Engineers, there's a whole plethora. Have you ever tried to get a dock permit even?
sure,
Yeah. And how many people do you have to go to get that done?
too.
So then if you're going to go that on steroids and you want to do the dredging, it gets blown up from there.
Well, I mean, and regulation and oversight is a good thing.
Yeah, if you don't have to pay for it. So we'll vote on the motion to
Well, there's-
amendment.
We
Public
need
comment.
public comment.
Amendment. Any public
Public comment.
Can you please come up to the microphone and state your name? Thank you.
My name's Carol Ann Leonard, and a comment about Marty. People cannot get from their homes to the bus stops to enable them to ride the bus. And there's a lot of people I see now riding electric bikes trying to get places because of this. There's older folks that might need a a bus to get somewhere. My car is old, might break down. I could use a bus maybe once in a while. Why don't you, I suggest maybe putting some bike racks next to the bus stop so people could ride up there, lock their bike, ride the bus. West Palm Beach has some kind of vehicle you can call, and then they will come and get you. It's within a certain area, mostly the downtown area, but you might consider something like that. And then I do agree with Jim as far as the dredging. It needs to be done on an environmental consideration, and I am glad you are considering putting that in. Thanks.
Carol Ann, if you call United Way, they have what's called Ride United. They will pick you up at your home. They will send a lift to your home, pick you up, and take you to where you're going. So it's
I didn't know
Ride
about
United, United Way.
It'd be nice if the public knew, but thank you for telling me.
Staff could also help provide information with regards to the systems that are already in place with
I'm sorry, who?
staff, public works
staff,
staff.
okay.
So like the MARTY system, they also are required to provide ADH paratransit, which is within 3/4 of a mile of the route. And then there are also another supplementary system called the Community Transportation Coordinator. They also provide rides in Martin County. So I'll send that information along.
Okay, well, it's right out there. There's a whole poster.
Yes.
And Ride United is about $23 a ride, door to door. Community coaches, how much a ride? Door to door, $44. Yeah. So it doesn't, what you guys provide now does not work. It's not economically feasible.
Mr. Moore, for clarification, the discussion earlier about the train station, was your concern about arrivals and departures having transportation from that station? In other words, a bus or some type of transportation?
In order to be effective as public transportation, it needs to be integrated. And so, you know, from a planning perspective, integrating public transportation and a new train station only makes sense.
Thank you.
And for your knowledge, City of Stewart has already said they will provide trams at the station to bring you either to the hotels or to downtown, if wherever you want to
That's how I
go.
remember, yeah, okay.
So,
So we're gonna call for a vote on
You
the
can-
amendment.
If there's no more discussion, you can call for a vote.
Call for a vote. All's in favor?
aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much, members of the local planning agency.
Members of the LPA, may I just remind you of our schedule coming up? We have several items on the 15th of August. We have several items on the 12th. You will remember that we canceled the meeting prior to that and have instituted the September 12th meeting. We have items for September 19th and items for October 3. And I just wanted to reiterate, we're at times kind of struggling to get a consensus or a quorum call, but with your help, I think we can get there.
I
as
will
far
not
as-
be here for the two early September meetings.
Yeah, can you repeat those September dates again?
I have the 12th and the 19th.
I will be here for the 19th.
I will as well, but not the 12th. Well, I might be for the 12th. I think I will be for the 12th.
We're hoping to bring forward the utility elements on the 12th,
The 19th, I won't be here.
10, 11, 12, 13.
So the next one is August 15th, correct?
Correct.
And I will be here for that.
I will as well.
I will as well.
I will as well. I'll be here for both of them.
Wonderful.
I appreciate it. We appreciate it.
During the meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Aye.